Good morning, everybody who's just joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. And just so everybody knows who just logged in, we are recording this session so that those of us who couldn't make it this morning can go back and watch later, or you can reference this video as well. It'll be up on our website and our YouTube channel.
Let's give it one more minute here, I think, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We've still got people clicking in, so. All right.
I think we're good, Andy. It started to slow down.
Okay. So, well, good morning, everyone. And on behalf of Erie Canal Way and the New York State Canal Corporation, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's New York State Canal System Tourism, Infrastructure, and Events Grants Information Session. And please note, Ashley has noted it a couple of times now, but we are recording and we'll post the recording of this session on Erie Canal Way's website in the next few days. And we'll also send an email out to the registrants. So if you received an email from us this morning or yesterday, we'll send you a note out to let you know that it's up and available and where you can find it. On the call with me today are Sasha Del Perro from the New York State Canal Corporation, and then Ashley Quimby Simone, Patrick Stenshorn, and me, Andy Kitzman, from Erie Canal Way. And Sasha, I'd just like to take a moment and thank you and all of your team members at the New York State Canal Corporation for this great partnership. It's fabulous. We love to be able to bring these opportunities to the corridor, and thank you. Just a quick summary of what we're going to do today, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Sasha will lead things off with an overview of our program goals, objectives, and priorities. Ashley will follow that with a summary of the events grants, and I'll wrap things up with a discussion around the infrastructure and amenities side of things. We're going to keep everyone muted and ask that you post your questions to the chat. Once the three of us are done summarizing, Patrick Stenshorn will moderate the question period by directing your chat questions to us. And because there are a lot of us on the call, we do ask that you please don't unmute to ask your questions out loud. It just helps keep people from talking over each other and just makes the meeting run a little bit smoother. And on that same note, as always, Ashley and I are both available to answer all of your questions by phone or email, video chat, whatever. We really encourage you to reach out directly to discuss your project with us. It always helps us to know who you are and what you're thinking about, and it helps us to provide some good information to you about how to make your application competitive. So it is a positive thing to always call the grant manager, and we definitely encourage you to do that. So with that introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Sasha. And Sasha, if you are ready, I will give it to you here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So first, I want to thank everybody for attending and for your interest in these grant programs. This is the second year that we're administering with Erie Canal Way National Heritage Corridor. However, these aren't completely new grants. They build off of two longstanding and very successful programs that were formerly run through Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor, which the Canal Corporation did support. Those were the community impact grants and the events and festivals grants, which you might already be familiar with or have applied for in the past. But in 2022, the New York State Canal Corporation decided that we wanted to increase our support for these efforts. And we worked with Erie Canal Way National Heritage Corridor to make some adjustments to them and to have them more closely align with New York State Canal Corporation's missions, as well as the missions of and goals of the Reimagine the Canals initiative, which are to boost recreational opportunities, build environmental resiliency, and encourage economic development throughout the canal system. We also made some programmatic changes. The first being that we changed the names of the program. So there might have been some confusion last year, and we hope that some of that has been cleared up. And then more importantly, we increased the grant funding totals for both the tourism infrastructure and amenities program, as well as events and festivals. For the tourism infrastructure program, we really wanted to capture small improvements that would have traditionally fallen below the threshold of our existing Canalway grant program, which is administered through the Canal Corporation and is part of the state's CFA process. This grant program has a minimum funding of $25,000 and a maximum funding of $150,000, and it must be a capital improvement project. And we realize that some communities, some non-for-profits, that this is a big ask, especially with a 50% match. We wanted to find smaller projects and other improvements that could be done along the canal system that would have big impacts, but would have smaller price ranges. Additionally, we've removed the requirement that these be capital improvement projects only, meaning that communities could use the funding to purchase equipment or pay for contracted services, such as, let's say, working with a porta potty company. And we also are providing funding to undertake restorative projects, which typically our CFA, our Canalway grant program, doesn't allow for. The goal here, again, is to support small scale projects and acquisition of equipment and amenities that enhance tourism, recreational assets along the system, and also encourages overnight stays. So that is the focus of the tourism and infrastructure amenities grant program. And then we also have the changes, the events and festival grants, and the program's focus is to support public events and festivals that encourage the exploration and enjoyment of the cultural, heritage, natural, and recreational offerings of the canal corridor. The Canal Corporation last year put in all of our sponsorship support funding into this pocket for events. And that is so that we can offer a competitive process for communities and non-for-profits to apply for funding from us. In years prior, we had people come to us asking for sponsorship support, and we would give it out throughout the course of the year. And then we would realize we've run out of money for a great event or festival. So we wanted to make sure that we had a fair and competitive process, and Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor is helping us do that by administering those funds for us and in partnership with their funding as well. I want to make a note that we do still have funding in the Canal Corporation's pocket for eligible conferences and seminars, which are not eligible as part of this program. And Ashley will cover those eligibility requirements later in this conversation. But I just want to mention that that we do have some funding for that. If you're interested in hosting a seminar or conference, reach out to me, and we can work with you on that. So again, Ashley and Andy will cover each of the programs, the eligibility requirements, any programmatic changes, but I want to also just make mention and thank Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor for their support. Their partnership in these grants last year was hugely successful due to their experience in administering these types of programs. We were able to fund 38 different non-for-profit organizations and municipalities, supporting 11 different tourism infrastructure and amenities improvements, as well as 27 events and festivals last year. So really great success. And once again, thank you, Andy and Ashley, for all your hard work on this. So I'll pass it over to you guys now.
Great. Thanks, Sasha. That was an excellent overview of the program, and we're really excited to be kicking things off again this year to support nonprofits and municipalities all across the corridor. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Ashley. I run the events side of this program. So if you've applied in the past, it's likely that you've heard from me at some point or another. And Andy handles the tourism and infrastructure side of the program, and we'll be hearing from him in just a little bit. But I first want to go over some of the goals and objectives of the event grants program and eligibility requirements. So for our event grants program, we're really looking to support events that celebrate and promote canal heritage, recreation, art, and music, and that serve people with disabilities or people from underserved populations. So those are really the goals and what we're going to be looking for, what our review team is going to be looking for when they review applications is do they kind of help capture some of those goals. And if you're looking for a specific list, you can go look at the program requirements that are listed on our website. That's the best resource in addition to this information session to really get an idea of what we're looking for. We're also looking for events that have the potential to draw in tourists and engage the community, introduce people to the canal system, and then again, celebrate the heritage of the canal system. So we get a lot of questions about events that charge fees. So events that charge fees are eligible to apply for the program, but they must be a reasonable fee. So I know that that's a little bit vague, but what we're really looking for are events that are available to the public, available and accessible, I should add, to the public. So when we say a reasonable fee, is that fee reasonable for everybody? Is it accessible to everybody, regardless of your income level or status? As Sasha had previously mentioned, we have made some changes to the funding cap for the event side. We are supporting events from $500 to $3,000, so you can ask for funding anywhere within that range. And because of that, we are not requiring event applicants to submit a detailed budget this year. So if you applied last year and you had to submit a budget, you will not see that in the application this year, but you will see more questions asking about your intended use of funds. And just as a reminder to everybody, we do require a dollar for dollar match through the events program. So every dollar that you request, you must also match with volunteer time or with funding from another resource. So whether that's another sponsorship or another grant program, and state and federal grants are not eligible for match. So it must come from another source. If awarded, you're going to be required to submit a form that documents that match and reports on your event. So just be prepared for that, that we do require that 30 days from the completion of your event, just so that we know how everything went. And we also really love to see photos. So don't forget to take photos during your event as well. Okay, that being said, the next thing that I want to do is just quickly share my screen and show the application so I can get into some of the technical things that you might run into as you're applying. Can everybody see my screen okay? Andy, can you see my screen? Okay, great. Thank
Yes, I
you.
can. Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I can.
So when you open the application, you're going to see, and you sign up for the online portal, you're going to see two options. One is for tourism, infrastructure, and amenities, and one is for events. So once you click into the event side of the program, you're going to enter the application. So if you're applying for both categories, you're going to have to answer some of the same questions twice. We're sorry about that. It just makes it easier for Andy and I to manage and for our review team to review everything. So we appreciate you guys taking the extra time and taking the extra step if you are applying for both categories of the program. So the first, you'll see 3 tabs across the top. The first one is just where you're going to name your application. And the second one is the applicant information. So this is just general information about your organization, your address, who your main point of contact is going to be, and things like that. So this is all pretty general and straightforward. The one thing I do want to note is that your legally authorized representative, that's going to be the person whose name we put on your contract if you are awarded a grant. So make sure that whoever's name needs to appear on the contract is whose name goes here. And that may be different from the main point of contact for your event. So the main point of contact should be the person who I will need to deal with for day-to-day things. And this is the person whose name will be on the contract. It may be the same, it may be different. And then on the second tab, or I'm sorry, the third tab is where we get into information about your event. So once you get in here, this is where all of the specific event information is going to go. You're going to add your event name, amount requested, and an event summary. The event summary will be used for the purpose of reviewing your application only. Later on in the application, you're going to be asked to write a promotional description, and that's an important distinction because that promotional description is going to be used when we promote your event to the public. So all of the awardees of the event grants program are going to be listed on Erie Canalway's website, and we also promote them in newsletters and on social media all throughout the summer so that people know what's going on in the corridor and when. So it's really important to have that promotional description really buttoned up and be able to be public facing, so that way it just makes it really easy for our team to promote your event and get more people out to it. You're also going to see event dates here. If your event takes place on one day only, you're just going to put in your event date and your event location. That's pretty easy and straightforward. And then if your event takes place on multiple days and multiple locations, you're going to see this chart pop up. And what's really important is to be very specific in this chart. So you're going to enter the event date or range, the event location. So this may be the name of the park, the name of a specific place if you're hosting a race, exactly where the race starts and where the race ends, and then what city, town, or village that specific event is located in. The more detail that you can provide in this chart, the better, because again, we're going to use this information to promote your event to the public. So whatever we need the public to know needs to go in this chart. So please be as detailed as possible with this information. We also provided a place for you to put notes. So if there's something else that you need to note that's not available to put into this chart, you can do that right here. And then below there is where we're going to be asking more questions about your intended uses of funds. Be very specific here and make sure you check the program guidelines for eligible uses of funds. We're also going to be asking for sources of matching funds. So this will be other grants that you may have secured for your event, volunteer hours that you plan on having during the event and things like that. Then you have your place for your promotional description. Then you'll be asked questions about the fee to attend your event. So if you do have a fee, you're going to be asked what that attendance fee covers. And again, be very specific. And then the rest is kind of some general information about target audience, how your event meets the goals of the program. And this is really kind of the meat of what our review team is going to be looking at. So this kind of really hits at the goals of your event and the types of people that you're looking to draw in with your event. And then at the very end, there's a place for you to attach a W-9 form. I have gotten a couple questions about additional attachments. We are only requesting a W-9 form for the event grants program. There is nowhere to add additional attachments, unfortunately. So any additional information that you need to include, please try and do it in the boxes above. We have a very competitive program here, which means the review team is reviewing a lot of applications. So as concise as you can be and as specific as you can be, the better. But if you do have any specific questions about events, feel free to drop them in the chat now. Or if you have any questions that are related to your specific event, please feel free to reach out to me. And we can talk through your application or talk through your event goals. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Andy. And he's going to walk through the tourism infrastructure side of the program.
Great, thanks, Ashley. And just a note, we'll take questions and answers. Be sure to put them in the chat, and we'll address those as soon as I'm done here. I shouldn't be more than a few minutes. So please, we thank you for your patience as we work through these. So the tourism infrastructure and amenity support accepts applications between $5,000 and $24,000 for a variety of of projects that enhance tourism and infrastructure along the canal system. I think the operative word here really is exterior and outdoor. A lot of the activities that we look at and receive are exterior and outdoor, but I wanted to mention that because we get a lot of questions about exhibits and things like that, and those really don't fall within this category. So, and we recognize that there is a need for that, but within the competitiveness of this project, we're really looking at external projects and external activities that have a high visibility. So with that said, we really are looking at construction or improvement of the recreational assets, including trails, parking areas, accessible boat launches, docks, storage facilities, rest stops, aesthetic features such as public art, plazas, gardens, or amphitheaters. And I just want to touch on public art for a moment here. Again, public art really talking about external. And if you're going to apply for a public art piece, really making a case for how it enhances the tourism aspects of the canal, and the ability to draw people to the canal is going to be key for a strong application there. And as Sasha noted, also looking at purchase and installation of equipment, machinery, etc., bike racks, potable water, restrooms, etc., really trail-related items here. Repair and restoration of existing waterway and trail features. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the application. Enhancements or equipment to improve access. And again, that's really, looking at accessibility and thinking about all users and things like that. So ADA requirements and things like that. And just a note on ADA is, in ADA, if you're going to go after something like that, you need to make a case for what that means, because it means very different things to a lot of different people. So be very specific about what your ADA is going to accomplish and how it's going to do that if you're going after something like that. And then contracted services. And these are some of those more key pieces that allow a program to operate and enhance a program kind of behind the scenes. And really, within that, I would really tie that into a larger application. So that can really be a component. Think more line items there. An application just for porta-johns probably isn't going to be very competitive. But if you're doing trail enhancements with porta-johns, that's gonna be a stronger application. All right. So with that, I'm going to switch my screens. Shut this one down. Oops. And I'm going to start. Dang it. Don't y'all just love technology? All right, here we go. So unlike Ashley, I have a few more buttons to go through. So bear with me here. This is the landing page for the tourism infrastructure application. The one thing I wanted to point out here really is that unlike last year, this year, we have the ability now to download a blank application for your use. And I believe the events also has this option. So you can basically take this PDF, download it to your computer and work offline, and then cut and paste your answers into the application document, which we strongly recommend. Like Ashley, the applicant information stuff is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go through all of this because Ashley's basically touched on all of the pieces. I did want to make one note here. Please be sure to include your current annual budget information, and I'll ask for a little bit more information here. This is related to your organization in this particular category. So within the application questions, this is really the meat of the application here. The project summary, this is used for public announcements, and we do reserve the right to do a little bit of editing for consistency of grammar, punctuation, etc. So, but please be succinct here. It is 50 words, and it's really, think again about the message that you want to convey to the public. How much are you asking for? What's your project? And who's it going to benefit, in a nutshell. The amount you're requesting, again, it may not exceed or be less than $5,000. We did get applications that exceeded or were less than, and in the less than, we're really not even going to review them. It's usually those projects are just too small to be competitive. So, it's really thinking more about your time. We encourage you not to apply for less than $5,000. And then 24, we're going to cut it at 24. So if you ask for more than that, we're not going to award more than that. So just to be clear there. And then also one other note here, we're going to get to budget later on in the in my notes here, but please make sure that this amount matches the amount that you're requesting on your budget worksheet that we'll touch base on in a few minutes. It's really important that those numbers match. Quick note on project start date, project completion date, and that note is these are 2-year grants. So the grant period would start from the award, which is sometime in May. So the date on the award letter, and then that allows you to start your project while we conduct the contracting process. And then it would be 2 years from that May. So 23, 24, 25. So these would be May of 25. Approximately is when these projects would need to wrap up. You can check all the apply here for the type of project you're asking for. The federal 106 determination, Ashley noted earlier that federal and state funds are not eligible for match. Because there's federal funds here through the National Park Service involved, a federal 106 determination, this is historic preservation stuff, will be required for anybody who is awarded. And whether you're putting a mural on a wall or you're doing enhancements, you're putting benches on the trail, whatever, we're going to have you go to SHPO and submit your project through Chris, and I can walk you through that process, but it is required. It's pretty straightforward. 99.9% of the projects you put in are not going to have an adverse impact. You get your award letter. It's a 30-day process, you get your no adverse impact letter, and then you're good to go. So, and I can walk you through that if you're awarded, but I did want to touch base on that. The other thing about that is if you have a 1409, which is the state historic preservation, that does not qualify. So the federal would need to go back. If you have a 1409, you're in good shape, but you just need to go back and have it upgraded to a 106. So I know that's confusing, and I'm happy to talk more about that later. Seeker is different than 106. That is the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and that is initiated at the local level. There's not much that I can do with that. You guys would have to initiate that, and that goes through the Canal Corporation. And so we can talk more about that if you're awarded, but your project also would need to have an environmental quality process as well. So that, again, for most of these projects, it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be their short form. Most of the projects that we see submitted aren't going to have a major environmental impact. They're not that robust, but it is a box that we'll need to check. Okay, project description. This is really the meat of this thing right here. It's 3,000 words, and that's not a lot, and we recognize that. And it's not a lot because we want you to be very succinct. What is not helpful is if you start to wax poetic about your organization, about all of your other work. We really want you to focus in on what you're asking for and what your project is. So that's really, there are some questions in here about who you are and what you do, but really focus in on what your project is about and try to be as succinct as you can. As Ashley noted, we'll have a lot of applications, and it's just helpful for our reviewers if we can get right to what it is you're looking for. Consultant services. I just wanted to touch on this quickly. In some instances, construction services are going to be required. And again, because of the federal and the state funding involved, municipalities, you guys can use your professional services that are part of your municipality to fulfill these obligations, and that's absolutely fine. Unfortunately, for not-for-profits, what we can't do is allow volunteers to implement projects. We really need, stamped engineering drawings, and we need licensed professional construction crews who have insurance and the whole business to do projects like bank stabilization or putting in a retaining wall or anything like that. So, we understand there's a need. We understand that you may have the capacity to do that within your organization, but because of the source of funding, we just can't award projects that don't go through the professional procurement process. Okay, site ownership, very important. If you own your property, great. If you don't, we need a letter of support from the applicant, and it needs to be uploaded as part of your application to be eligible. All right. Project budget. We do ask for a budget. This is all pretty straightforward. I wanted to note under cash match, the one thing to note here is if you're using cash match and you want to use staff time, this is where you put it. Staff time is considered a force account in the state federal system, and that's cash. So show that here and not as in-kind, please. And then total project cost. So I do ask for a detailed budget. And I've got a template that we'd like you to use. It's pretty straightforward to get to. I'm just going to walk you all through it right here. So on the right here in the hint section is the template. And that brings you to the Google Doc template. You then can go over to File and download. Download it as an Excel file. And then you can save it right to your computer, wherever on your computer you're using it. Once you've done that, you can complete the file. Don't complete it here and then try to download it. Complete it on your computer after you've downloaded it to your file. Once you've done that, you can go back in here, select the file, and upload it from your computer. I'm happy to walk anyone through that process. Please don't hesitate to call me and ask for some help if you need some help with that. I know I had to get help getting it all set up. So that's not as clear cut as it could be, but please don't hesitate. In the budget justification, we really, the more clear you can be about what you're asking for, the better. The more obtuse you are in your budget justification, the more questions the reviewer is going to have. It's really that simple. Just try to be very straightforward about what you're asking for. If you've got line items in your budget, talk about each of the line items and what those are for and why they're important to the success of your project. All right, last one. So I've actually got two tabs here, one for municipal attachments and one for not-for-profit attachments. And the reason for that is the municipal attachments are different than the not-for-profit attachments, and it was just cleaner to do it this way. So under the municipal attachments, you have the option for letters of support. You need to combine all of your letters of support into one PDF. You can only upload one PDF here. So combine them and then upload them. And again, I'm more than happy to help you with combining. Not a problem. And then we need your most recent management discussion and analysis report. And that's just for municipalities. And if you don't have that, we'll ask why you don't have that, and then ask for a simple financial statement. And again, happy to talk with any about those. For not-for-profits, again, letters of support, same thing. They need to be all combined into one PDF. They are optional. Your most recent audited financial statements, your most recent IRS Form 990, and your most current internal financial statements. I've also got optional here beside each of these. And I just want to note, this is confusing and misleading, and I recognize that. In order for you to be able to submit the application, I have to make these optional, because if you're a municipality, you're not going to upload these, and I don't have any way to distinguish between the two. So please just note that these are not optional. I recognize that that's confusing, and if for whatever reason they don't get uploaded, I will circle back to you and ask you to provide them after the fact. With no penalty, because I do recognize that that's not clear. All right, I'm going to stop right there and stop sharing. And I'm going to ask Patrick if there are any questions at this point.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions in the chat. The first I'm going to pose to Sasha and Andy. I'll let either of you take it. So Marilyn asked if there are a set of standard amenities for the canal, bike racks, restrooms, benches, etc., that you like to see installed. Is there kind of something that's a preferred amenity and then sort of an extra? I'll let Sasha maybe start with that.
Sure. I mean, Andy, I was going to point to the guide that Erie Canalways put together, so maybe you want to talk about that. But just briefly, we are working on design standards for benches and bike racks, so we will have one set standard for that at some point this spring, which would hopefully give you enough time to implement. I could show you kind of what the design looks like more generally, so that maybe you could try to meet the look of it. Regarding restrooms, we don't have a canal standard at the moment, but Andy, I believe maybe your guide covers that. I'm not sure. ADA accessibility is obviously always encouraged, a focus of ours. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I think the design standards for Erie Canalway really have to do with access to the canal system itself. And so our design standards are focused on docks and accessibility for those docks, in particular hand launch docks. The canal system provides some very unique challenges in terms of access, especially the operating system, the barge canal system, because it wasn't designed for kayaks, canoes, hand launch vessels. So reach out to me if you're thinking about applying for that. We do take into account whether or not you're looking at those design standards. And that gets back to my comment earlier about ADA accessibility. Just because your ramp is at the right incline doesn't mean that the person using it can't lose control and end up in the canal. So please address those kind of detailed questions as well.
I'm gonna start with a technical question and loop back to a question for Ashley. Can you download applications without having to create an account in the portal?
I believe you
take
can.
that.
Oh, go ahead.
That's right.
Please, Ashley.
You can't, unfortunately. So you do have to create at least an account to go in and access the application, but there is an option to download the application as a PDF as soon as you log in. So you don't have to fill out an application fully to see all the questions, but you do have to create an account. And I will say, we don't use your information to spam you with anything. It's really just to access the portal. We're not going to send you marketing messages or anything. So if that's a concern, don't worry about that.
So Ashley, a couple questions about events and if events can be sort of combined or if multiple projects might be related, how they can do it. So there's a question about, can events be combined into the application? And a follow-up, can towns, villages, and counties apply separately for a bigger project and or event?
So let me address the first question first. So can events be combined? The short answer is yes, but I would definitely encourage you to reach out to me individually to discuss what grouping of events that you're going to put together. So for example, if you have a kickoff event to a concert series, that absolutely should be combined into one application. Or if you have a recreational event that's going to happen on specific days throughout the summer, that should be combined into one application. But the goals of your grouping of events, whatever it should be similar or the same. So if you have 3 events throughout the summer and they're completely unrelated to each other and they target different audiences and they celebrate different things, I would encourage you to pick the one that's most closely aligned with the goals that are laid out in the program objectives and apply for that one in particular. So like I said, whoever asked that question, please feel free to reach out to me on an individual basis and we can talk about your specific events and I can kind of give you more guidance based on your specific situation. And then in terms of can towns, villages, and counties apply separately for a bigger project and or event? The answer is yes, you can, but our program is so competitive, and I'm speaking for events, and I'll let Andy answer for the other side of things. You can, but our program is so competitive, at least it was last year. So we're going to assume that we're going to get at least as many applications as we did last year, that it's unlikely that we're going to fund one event from 3 different organizations. So I would highly encourage you to really just do one application and put all of your efforts behind one application, because it's going to be unlikely that we'll fund one event into 3 different organizations.
I would just say yes, the same with tourism infrastructure. I would not anticipate we would award 2 applications to one project. We won't do that. I can guarantee it.
I think this question is going to be for Andy, because I'm going to assume it relates to infrastructure. Can the site that would be improved be owned by the Canal Corp? Or maybe for Sasha?
Sasha, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so that is possible. However, the applicant would need to go through a review process with the New York State Canal Corporation. And I would say that it's probably better for you to come to us prior to applying or within that application period, because it's going to be hard for us to award a grant without those permissions in place first. If there's some sort of capital project, we would need a work permit with the entity that is doing that work, which requires insurance. And then there would also need to be a use and occupancy permit with that entity. In most cases, if you're going to, let's just say, install benches or a kiosk, we would want to have an agreement in place that that is now kind of your property in terms of the amenity that you've installed, and it's your responsibility for caring for. So they're not roadblocks, they're just, a punch list of necessary steps that would need to happen. And again, my email is on this invite. You're welcome to email me privately too about maybe what you're thinking, and we can get the ball rolling and looking into whether or not that's a possibility.
Thank you, Sasha. Andy, for infrastructure grants, do you have an estimate of how long SHPO and SECRA review take?
Yeah, the SHPO review, as long as you don't have an eagle nest on your site or something like that, it should be a 30-day turnaround. As I said, most of these are fairly low impact projects, which means it's a no adverse impact. So it's a short form, you fill it out, you send it to the SHPO office, and I have all of that information, and that goes from there. If you want to do something that is going to have, like, let's say you want to do something, let's say you want to put an embankment in or something like that, that may trigger all kinds of things. So that may trigger Army Corps permits. It may trigger all kinds of different things that would require a full seeker, and that's going to take quite some time.
Do those processes have to be initiated during application, or can they be initiated after approval?
Yeah, no, we don't ask anybody to start these processes until that would be part of the contracting process. So if you have them in place, great. You don't lose points if you don't, for sure. So don't hesitate if you haven't started those processes. And I have technical information that I can provide that provides a lot more information if indeed you're awarded.
Another for you, Andy. Is there a match requirement for infrastructure grants from other grants, and from what other sources is the match required?
Yeah, so there is like the events, we do ask a 50-50 match, and that can be in kind So that can be your volunteers, etc. It can be the staff time I mentioned earlier, etc. It can be from a community foundation grant. It can be from your private cash. It just can't be federal or state funded.
Can you provide grant matching dollars for volunteers, use of county sheriffs, et cetera, things like that? That
As
might
long
be
as you can
for,
for
that might be for Ashley, I would assume. But
Yes, volunteer hours absolutely count as match. And once your event is complete and you're asked to report on that, we'll have a volunteer hour match sheet that you can complete, and it'll help you calculate all of your volunteer hours times whatever the rate is for volunteer hours. That will be for the summer or whenever you're doing your reporting, and we'll have a link for you to follow to get that rate. But yes, absolutely, volunteer hours count towards match.
would things like if an event utilized police presence for security, firefighters, or ambulance presence for health and safety, would those things as well too?
Yes, that would
Okay.
be more of like an in-kind donation.
Okay.
So there'll be a place on your match form report to report on volunteer hours, in-kind services, and then there will be one for, cash match. So other grants or things that you might get. So yes, absolutely, all of that counts. Great question.
And follow up just to restate. So can't use state or federal funds for match, but municipal funds, are those eligible?
Yes.
yes, they are. As long as they aren't state or federally sourced.
There's one general question about the funding. So if there's just some, if you could just provide some insights on why the difference in the maximum funding from the previous year, from last year.
I think that's probably in reference to the event grants.
Yes, I think so.
And the answer to that is kind of twofold. So one, Sasha touched on at the very beginning of the meeting today, and that's partially because we pulled out things like conferences from the eligibility for this program. So, if you're hosting like a major conference for Canal specific folks or a local conference, that is ineligible because we're really looking for public events that are able to draw in everybody. And the other reason for that is because we found ourselves last year, again, with a very competitive program, and we had a lot of worthy events apply. So it was a really big struggle for our selection committee to kind of narrow it down. And so what we ended up having to do is kind of reduce the funding amounts automatically in order to spread the wealth, for lack of a better term. So our funding cap being significantly reduced this year allows us to do that. And support some smaller community events that we could definitely see supporting, in future years, or that have really great potential, but are kind of just getting started, along with other events that could really use, a few $1,000s. So, Sasha, please feel free to add to that answer, but those are the two main reasons.
Right, I know.
Think I covered it.
Ashley, you covered it perfectly.
Great.
So I don't have any other questions in the chat box right now. I think I've answered everything that's been, so if anybody has any other questions, I think we can give a few more, just a little bit longer. So can you provide a little bit more information about how conferences and seminars would request a sponsorship?
Sure. I feel like I'm having a little bit of a delay, so I'm sorry if my screen is frozen or something like that. But the the intent of this program, again, for events and festivals isn't to fund conferences and seminars. Those usually come at higher dollar amounts. We want to be as supportive as possible. But yeah, if you have an event, a conference or seminar that you think is worthy of Canal Corporation sponsorship, which I'm sure it is, yeah, please just email me and I'll work with our marketing department. That's who typically gives out sponsorship funding, and we'll work to see if we can support it. Like all of our funding at Canal Corporation, there's not much of it, so we have to use it sparingly. But yeah, please send me the information and we'll get back to you.
I want to note for Erie Canalway, we have sort of the same process. It's not a formal process, reaching out to one of our staff members, either Ashley or me. And then what I wanted to reiterate was to do it very early in the calendar year. Because although we're on a different fiscal cycle, but I would say, using the calendar as your benchmark, the sooner in the calendar year you reach out to us, the more likely we'll have funding, because like Canal Corporation, we don't have a large pot, and it tends to go quickly. So, and it needs to be very, very canal corridor focused.
Yeah, this is I know it's a bummer.
Well,
We
if
have
there's
other-
any other, nope, as of right now, there's no other questions. So maybe give just a minute or two to see if anybody might be typing in any last minute questions, or if there's any other last minute pieces that either of you would like to point out.
I just wanted to share, I saw there was a question about Sasha's email address, so that's in the chat for everybody. But once we send around a follow-up email from today's meeting, we can include Andy's email address, my email address, and Sasha's. So if you have any specific questions for each of us, definitely reach out to us individually.
So a couple more questions have come through. So one is about what is included in the canal corridor. And I think the best thing to do would be to and point people to Erie Canalway's website. There's a map up there that has an overlay of the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor. And so it's eriecanalway.org, and there's a map right there that you can click on. You can move it around, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, so you can see what, if the location that you might be applying for is within the corridor. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in and add any more there, but yeah, looks like Andy's pulling it up. So
this is the map here, and I think the thing to really focus in on is, oops, if I can use this correctly. As you scroll in, you can see a darker green area with a dark green border. That's the municipal boundary for the 230 communities that parallel the canal system, that are adjacent to the canal system. Basically, anyone can apply for a grant to Erie Canalway. So if you're in Williamstown or Morrisville, you can apply for a project, but it has to take place within this green boundary. And I would say the closer you are to the canal system, the closer you are to the trails, the associated trails, et cetera, in general, not always, the more competitive you're going to be. But by opening this up, you can see from where you are. And it's got all kinds of cool things in it too. So feel free to play around with it. It shows you the locks, it shows you the municipal centers, et cetera. So.
Right. I want to just add on to Andy's comment that it's not maybe necessarily about the proximity to the canalway or the trail, but certainly there needs to be a tie-in. I mean, the whole purpose of this is to have a connection to the canal system's history, heritage, natural assets. So you really have to make a case in your application of how you're supporting the more generally, those are going to be the applications that score well.
Absolutely.
Another question that kind of bridges the two. How would you define the difference between an exhibit and an event?
I would, from a museum standpoint, my background is in museums. From a museum standpoint, an exhibition really is going to be inside. It's going to be focused on one site. It's going to potentially be temporary. I know there's permanent exhibitions as well. Again, I think technically they're eligible, but you'd really have to make a strong argument for how it's going to have a quarter-wide impact or a system-wide impact. How are you really going to use this to champion? So, for instance, a few years ago, working with Museum Association of New York, Canal Corp and Erie Canalway both sponsored a Smithsonian Waterways exhibition. And that came in, it traveled to several different sites in the corridor. It raised a ton of awareness. I think that's one of those exceptions. I think if it's a permanent exhibition or something within your facility that's temporary, you'd really have to, that marketing piece is going to be key for it to be considered. And then I think what was the other half of that question, Patrick? That was
event. Yeah. So how would you differentiate an exhibit from an event?
Yeah,
so Ashley, do you want to take that? Thanks.
Yeah. So like Andy said, if you have an exhibit at a museum and it focuses on the canal, that's not an event. But if you have like a launch, I want to call it a launch party or a launch event around that exhibit, that may qualify for the event grants program. So I would be happy to talk to whoever asked that question about their specific project. And then we can kind of point you in the direction of whether that you might need to go down Andy's half of the application or mine.
Oh, I just got an emailed question here. So Patrick, I'm going to jump in real quick here. Somebody asked if this was specific to the Erie Canal or does the Champlain Canal qualify? And if we think about the map that I just showed, that eligible area is the four branches, the Erie, the Oswego, the Cayuga Seneca, and the Champlain, as well as the Seneca Cayuga canals. That's sort of the boundary. That's the recognized New York State canal system. I did want to note that 2023 is the bicentennial of the opening of the Champlain Canal system. So just to throw that out there.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep. No other questions at this moment.
Okay. Well, we're just about at 11 o'clock. So unless anybody has any last minute questions, I think we're going to wrap up for today. And again, please feel free to reach out to Andy, myself, or Sasha on an individual basis if you have questions about your specific project or event. We're happy to help, and the recording of this meeting will be available on Erie Canalway's website and our YouTube channel within a couple of business days. So thank you everybody so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We're so excited to be able to offer this grants program across the corridor and to each of you. And we're really excited for another canal season.
Thanks all.
You.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.